Hey guys! Today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. A quiet suburban neighborhood in Charlotte County, Florida. A Sunday evening, no different from hundreds of others. Neighbors are having dinner, watching TV, getting ready for the new week ahead. No one suspects that inside one of the homes, something has happened. Something that will soon shake even the most seasoned investigators. At 6 p.m., a call comes into emergency services. The voice on the line is young, steady, devoid of panic. He reports that an accident has occurred. The dispatcher's questions don't seem to faze him. His responses are short, precise, almost rehearsed. When officers arrive, they are met by a young man. He stands calmly, hands in his pockets, his gaze distant. Inside the house, they find a deeply unsettling scene. Soon, detectives will begin piecing together the events of the day, looking for inconsistencies in his account, and digging into the family's past. They suspect that this case is just the tip of the iceberg, that the story began long before that evening, and that the past had already left behind someone no one had thought to ask about. The Griffith family seemed like an average middle-class American household. They lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a city known for its quiet atmosphere and strong family values. But beneath the surface, there was a deep, hidden tension, one that would eventually lead to a tragic chain of events. Charles Griffith was born on September 12, 1980, in Tulsa. He grew up in a well-off household where strict discipline was a way of life. His father served in the military, and his mother was an elementary school teacher. From an early age, Charles was taught to follow the rules without question, to be firm in his decisions, and to suppress his emotions. This upbringing would later shape the way he approached his own family life. Catherine Moore was born on May 3, 1985, in Jacksonville, Florida. Unlike Charles, she was raised in a warm and supportive home. Her parents, Robert and Linda Moore, had lived in the same house in Charlotte County, Florida, for decades. From childhood, Catherine dreamed of becoming a teacher. She had a natural love for working with students and believed in treating others with kindness. The two met in 1999 at the University of Oklahoma. Catherine had moved from Florida to study education, while Charles was enrolled in business school. Confident and ambitious, he quickly caught her attention. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and by 2001, after 2 years of dating, they were married. Catherine was 16 and Charles was 21. Not long after, their first son, Christopher Griffith, was born on June 1, 2002. The young couple tried to build a life together, but even then, Charles began to show signs of a controlling nature. He enforced strict household rules, managed all finances, and demanded absolute obedience. Their second son, Colin Griffith, was born on October 14, 2006. Catherine hoped that expanding their family would bring them closer together, but instead, Charles became even more authoritarian. He saw his sons as extensions of himself and was determined to raise them with complete discipline. This was especially true for Colin, who from an early age displayed an unusual emotional detachment. By the time Colin turned 5, there were already warning signs. He rarely showed emotion, didn't react to discipline the way most kids would, and had a habit of staring at people without blinking. While Catherine found his behavior unsettling, Charles believed it was a sign of strength. After nearly 19 years of marriage, Catherine could no longer tolerate her husband's overbearing nature. In 2020, she filed for divorce. The separation was finalized on August 17, 2020. The court granted Charles full custody of Colin, citing his financial stability and ability to provide a structured environment. Catherine, without a high-paying job, struggled to convince the judge that she was the better choice as a custodial parent. She moved back to Charlotte County, Florida, to be near her parents. But even after the divorce, she never stopped fighting to regain custody of Colin. She filed multiple appeals and sought a retrial, but Charles always managed to block her efforts. Meanwhile, Colin became increasingly withdrawn. At school, he barely interacted with anyone, spending most of his time immersed in video games. At home, he was raised under strict rules, where any display of weakness was met with harsh discipline. Catherine received occasional messages from him, but they were distant, lacking warmth or emotion. Then, in 2023, 3 years after the divorce, she received a call that changed everything. Charles Griffith had been found dead, and Colin had been taken into custody as a suspect. What followed would send shockwaves through Charlotte County, Florida, sparking intense public debate and scrutiny. On February 14, 2023, emergency services received a call from a teenager who reported that he had shot his father. Colin Griffith spoke in a calm voice, stating that he acted in self-defense. When the dispatcher asked if medical assistance was needed, he simply replied that his father was no longer alive. When officers arrived at the scene, they found 15-year-old Colin sitting on the couch. On the floor lay the body of Charles Griffith, with 2 gunshot wounds, one to the chest, the other to the head. The firearm was nearby, and only Colin's fingerprints were found on it. Life with his father after his parents' divorce had been anything but easy. After being granted full custody, Charles maintained complete control over his son's life. Any disobedience was treated as defiance, and consequences followed immediately. Colin was raised under strict discipline, where showing emotions was considered a sign of weakness. He was forbidden from contacting his mother or leaving the house without permission, and any attempt to challenge his father's rules resulted in threats or the removal of basic privileges. Tensions between them had been escalating. Charles demanded perfection, expecting his son to follow every rule without question. Any defiance led to bursts of anger. The breaking point came when Colin confided in his father about his orientation. Charles took it as a personal affront, and from that moment on, their relationship became a constant battleground. Colin felt trapped with no way out. That day, according to Colin, his father came home in a bad mood. A heated argument broke out, quickly turning physical. Colin claimed that Charles grabbed a knife and began threatening him. Fearing for his safety, he took his father's gun, which was kept in the house, and fired twice. However, the initial investigation raised doubts among detectives. Charles had been shot twice, once in the chest and once in the head. This suggested that after the first shot, he was likely still alive but unable to resist, making the second shot a deliberate final action. Colin did not appear frightened or remorseful. His behavior surprised even seasoned investigators. He didn't ask for help, didn't show any signs of distress or panic. When questioned, he repeated the same version of events in a steady tone, never changing his story. He didn't try to justify himself or show concern over the possible consequences. Catherine Griffith received the news of her ex-husband's death late on the evening of February 14th. When she got a call from the police, she first thought it was a mistake. Upon hearing that her son had been taken into custody in connection with Charles's death, she couldn't believe it. Her initial reaction was a mix of shock and anxiety, but soon, a wave of relief followed. Charles could no longer threaten her, control Colin, or prevent them from reconnecting. But that moment of relief was soon overshadowed by the harsh reality: her son had taken a life. Detectives remained uncertain about the full truth, but they had no concrete evidence to disprove Colin's claims. He was the only witness to what had happened, and there was no clear proof of premeditation. The firearm belonged to Charles. There were no signs of a struggle in the house, and Colin showed no visible injuries. Prosecutors accepted the self-defense argument, and within weeks, the case was closed. Colin was released with no charges. Few realized that this day was only the beginning of a series of events that would soon lead to an even more disturbing tragedy. At the end of March 2023, a little over a month after his father's passing, Colin Griffith moved to Charlotte County, Florida, where his mother, Catherine, lived. Now that she had full custody, she hoped to start fresh with her son, creating a safe and stable environment for him. The first few months were surprisingly uneventful. Colin enrolled in a local high school and signed up for community college courses, while Catherine did everything she could to create the appearance of a normal family life. She frequently posted photos with him on social media, beach trips, family dinners, holiday celebrations. Friends in the comments expressed their support, happy that she was finally reunited with her son. No one suspected the unsettling reality hidden behind those seemingly happy images. Colin remained distant, showing little attachment to his mother. He rarely engaged in conversations, never expressed gratitude for her care, and spent most of his time playing video games. He showed no real interest in school, and whenever Catherine tried to involve him in household responsibilities, he reacted with frustration. At first, she attributed it to the stress of recent events, but soon, it became clear that the issue ran much deeper. Over time, troubling signs began to emerge. Colin would lash out unexpectedly if things didn't go his way. He isolated himself in his room for long hours, ignoring his mother's calls and requests. During arguments, his expression remained eerily blank, even when Catherine pleaded with him in tears. By fall 2023, tensions escalated. When Catherine attempted to set limits on his gaming time, asking him to help around the house and focus on school, Colin exploded in anger. He grabbed his controller and hurled it against the wall before storming out of the house without a word. Hours later, he returned as if nothing had happened. The situation worsened. In November 2023, another serious incident occurred. Catherine once again tried to get Colin to take on some responsibilities at home, but this time he responded with aggression. He shoved her to the floor, grabbed her by the hair, and pinned her down, shouting threats. His grandmother, who was in the house at the time, witnessed the entire event. She immediately called the police. When officers arrived, Colin attempted to justify his actions, claiming that his mother had attacked him first. However, his grandmother's statement directly contradicted his version of events. As a result, Colin was arrested on charges related to domestic aggression. Following his arrest, he was sent for a psychiatric evaluation. Doctors noted signs of severe behavioral issues, including a lack of empathy, an inability to express remorse, and heightened aggression. Despite expert recommendations that he required long-term therapy, Colin was released after several months and sent back to live with his mother. Catherine had begun to fear her own son. She confided in friends about her concerns but didn't know what to do. On one hand, he was still her child, someone she loved. On the other, she sensed that he had become a real threat. Even then, she couldn't have imagined that her worst fears would soon come true. After Colin's psychiatric hospitalization, his behavior remained unchanged. He continued to show aggression and remained emotionally distant from his mother. But now, he had begun openly threatening her. When doctors discharged him, they documented that he had no desire to return to Catherine's home. He stated that if he were forced to live with her, he would either take his own life or harm her. These statements were recorded in an official report, but no further action was taken. Law enforcement was also aware of his issues. In February 2024, after he ran away to his grandmother's house again, officers took him into custody. When questioned, he repeated the same threat. If sent back to his mother, he would harm her. The authorities noted this in their report, but instead of intervening further, they placed him back in the social services system. Soon after, he was back in Catherine's home. By this point, she fully understood that her son was dangerous. In conversations with friends, she admitted that she was afraid of him, that he constantly threatened her, and that his behavior was becoming increasingly alarming. She even started questioning the self-defense claim Colin had made after his father's death. As she went over the details of that night, she began to wonder if he hadn't acted out of fear, but rather, out of a desire to be free of his father altogether. Despite her growing fear, Catherine tried to keep the peace. She hoped that kindness would change his behavior. In the spring of 2024, she started buying him expensive gifts, new gadgets, designer clothes, and money for outings. When he graduated high school in May, she even bought him a car. She believed that these gestures would win his affection and prove that she cared. She posted congratulatory messages on social media, celebrating his accomplishments. To outsiders, it seemed like things were improving. The photos showed a happy family, vacation trips, shared meals, and quality time together. But behind the curated images, tension was building. Catherine tried to convince herself that she was doing everything possible, but deep down, she knew she was living with someone who might one day cross the line. And soon, he did. Just days before the tragic event, tensions between Colin and Catherine boiled over again. On September 6, 2024, another argument erupted. Once again, Colin refused to do his share of household chores, and Catherine demanded that he stop ignoring her requests. He hated being told what to do, and his response was immediate. His temper flared. As the argument escalated, he grabbed his belongings and stormed out of the house, heading straight to his grandmother's. This wasn't the first time Colin had run away to his grandmother's house, but this time she was afraid. She knew what he was capable of and feared that getting involved could put her in danger. When Catherine learned where her son was, she decided she could no longer allow him to do whatever he wanted. On the morning of September 8th, she called him and warned that if he didn't return home, she would have to contact the police and Child Protective Services. Colin ignored her. That afternoon, around 4 p.m., Catherine drove to her mother's house to pick him up in person. According to witnesses, a heated argument broke out between them in the front yard. Several neighbors heard shouting, but only one woman actually saw what happened. She watched as Colin aggressively grabbed his mother by the hair and dragged her inside the house. Catherine struggled, pleading with him to let her go, but he didn't respond. The door slammed shut, and after that, everything went silent. None of the neighbors called the police. The woman who had witnessed him forcefully pulling his mother inside chose not to intervene. Later, she would admit that she was too scared for her own safety. 2 hours passed before a call came into emergency services. Colin told the dispatcher that his mother was no longer alive. He spoke in a steady voice, claiming that during their argument, Catherine had grabbed a knife and threatened him. According to him, at some point, she tripped and fell, causing the blade to pierce her neck. He emphasized that he had tried to help her, but it was already too late. When officers arrived at the scene, Colin was waiting for them outside. His demeanor didn't match the situation. He showed no signs of distress or fear. The first thing he said to the officers was, "I know my rights. I need a lawyer." He didn't try to explain what had happened, nor did he ask for help for his mother. Inside the house, police discovered Catherine's body. The scene Colin had described was impossible to picture in reality. The knife had gone in too deep, and the wounds didn't align with his version of events. To investigators, it quickly became clear that this wasn't an accident. It was an intentional act. As the crime scene unit began processing the evidence, forensic experts meticulously documented the layout of the house, the blood patterns, and any potential clues that could confirm or contradict Colin's account. The first thing that stood out to investigators was the complete lack of any signs of struggle. If Catherine had truly tripped and fallen onto the knife, there would have been indications of sudden, chaotic movement, scratches on the floor, displaced furniture, blood patterns suggesting movement. But there were none. Her body lay still. The blood pooled in a single spot, and the depth of the wound made an accidental fall nearly impossible. The medical examiner who arrived at the scene conducted a preliminary assessment of the body and immediately noted several key details. The depth of the knife wound indicated the use of significant force. The angle of the injury made it highly unlikely that Catherine could have accidentally fallen onto the blade in the way Colin described. Experts also observed that her hands had no defensive cuts, the kind typically seen when someone tries to protect themselves. This suggested that she either hadn't realized the danger in time or had been immobilized when the fatal wound was inflicted. Detectives then turned their attention to Colin's statements and compared them to his call to emergency services. As they carefully reviewed the recording, one detail stood out. When the dispatcher asked if his mother needed medical assistance, Colin made no effort to check if she could still be helped. He simply stated that she was no longer alive. His detached tone and lack of urgency raised immediate suspicion. Investigators also closely examined the physical evidence inside the house. A crucial question was whether Catherine had actually held the knife, as Colin claimed. Forensic analysis of the weapon's handle revealed no fingerprints belonging to her, only Colin's. This directly contradicted his account that she had grabbed the knife first. Another major inconsistency was the lack of blood traces in the kitchen, where, according to Colin, Catherine had supposedly taken the knife. Crime scene specialists meticulously examined the countertops, floors, and surfaces. There was no blood. If she had been carrying the knife before the fatal injury, Some trace of her movement should have been present, but there was none. One detective noted striking similarities between this crime and the 2023 case involving Charles Griffith. Reviewing the old case files, he saw an identical pattern. Colin immediately calling authorities, delivering a calm and rehearsed explanation, showing no emotion, and immediately requesting a lawyer. Two separate crimes, but the exact same behavior. Concerned by these findings, investigators requested an additional psychological evaluation of Colin. They also reviewed records from his previous psychiatric hospitalization. It was revealed that a year before his mother's death, he had explicitly told doctors that he would either harm her or himself. Now, those statements had become a chilling prediction of what was to come. Detectives also revisited witness testimonies. One neighbor had seen Colin forcibly drag his mother inside the house, while another had heard screaming but failed to report it. Now that the case had escalated to a homicide, these details became critical pieces of evidence. Their statements directly refuted Colin's claim that the incident had been an accident. A crucial breakthrough came when investigators analyzed Colin's phone. Forensic specialists recovered deleted messages and search history. In the week leading up to the crime, Colin had searched for phrases like, "fastest ways to kill someone," "how long does it take to bleed out," and "legal loopholes in homicide cases." These searches became a powerful argument for the prosecution, strongly indicating that Catherine's death had been premeditated. Further evidence surfaced when friends of Catherine revealed that just 2 days before the tragedy, she had expressed deep fear for her life. She confided that if anything happened to her, her son would be responsible. It was a final warning, one that no one had the chance to act on in time. With overwhelming evidence in hand, the Charlotte County District Attorney's Office formally charged Colin Griffith with first-degree homicide. He was transferred to a detention facility, where he awaited trial. Investigators also began working with authorities in Oklahoma to reopen the case of his father's death. Throughout the entire process, Colin never showed a single sign of remorse. He didn't ask about his mother, showed no concern for his own fate, and remained emotionless. Officers who interrogated him reached the same conclusion. Before them sat a cold, detached individual who not only took lives but did so without the slightest hint of regret. After Colin Griffith's arrest, the Charlotte County District Attorney's Office formally charged him with first-degree homicide. Investigators concluded that the crime was committed in a calculated manner, with no signs of self-defense, ruling out the possibility of reducing the charge to a lesser offense. Colin was placed in the county detention center while awaiting trial. Given the circumstances of the crime, prosecutors announced their intent to seek the maximum sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, a legal complication arose due to his age. At the time of the crime, Colin was 17, which could impact how the case was handled in court. The prosecution filed a motion to have him tried as an adult. Florida law allows minors to be prosecuted in the adult criminal justice system if the crime is deemed particularly severe and poses a significant public threat. The judge granted the motion, meaning Colin would face the same penalties as an adult defendant. During the trial, the prosecution presented evidence that Catherine Griffith's death had been premeditated. Investigators revealed that Colin had conducted online searches related to taking a life, including how long it takes for someone to bleed out. Digital forensic experts also recovered deleted messages indicating his interest in legal loopholes related to homicide charges. Eyewitness testimonies further strengthened the prosecution's case. Colin's defense attorneys argued that he was mentally unstable and may have acted impulsively. However, prosecutors introduced psychiatric records showing that he had not only been fully aware of his actions, but had also explicitly threatened his mother months before the crime, stating that he would either harm her or himself. This became one of the key arguments against his defense. The prosecution also raised concerns about Colin's past. In 2023, he had taken the life of his father, Charles Griffith, but at the time, the case was closed due to a lack of irrefutable evidence. Now, with a second crime demonstrating a complete lack of remorse, authorities in Oklahoma decided to revisit the circumstances surrounding Charles Griffith's death. Investigators began reaching out to potential witnesses who might shed light on the events of February 2023. They interviewed Charles Griffith's friends, former colleagues and Colin's classmates, to determine if he had ever expressed intentions of harming his father. The Charlotte County DA's office also provided Oklahoma authorities with materials from the current case, highlighting the striking similarities in Colin's behavior in both incidents. New evidence soon emerged. A review of old school records uncovered a statement from a former student who recalled Colin mentioning that he wished his father was gone and that life would be better without him. At the time, no one had taken it seriously. Now, those words carried a far more chilling implication. The Oklahoma District Attorney stated that if further evidence surfaced, the case against Colin for his father's death could be officially reopened. For this to happen, investigators needed either new witnesses or direct proof that his self-defense claim had been false. Meanwhile, the trial for Catherine Griffith's case continued. Prosecutors remained firm in their push for life without parole, emphasizing that Colin had shown no remorse, never expressed regret, and had maintained an eerily cold demeanor since his arrest. As in his first case, Colin displayed no emotion, neither in court nor during interrogations. His behavior mirrored how he had spoken about his father's death in 2023, with the same calm, detached manner in which he now discussed his mother's death. This only reinforced the prosecution's argument. The final verdict in Catherine Griffith's case had yet to be delivered. However, the key question remained: would Oklahoma investigators find enough evidence to charge Colin in his father's case as well? If they did, he could face additional sentencing, further ensuring that he would never have a chance at freedom. Regardless of the outcome, one thing was certain: Colin Griffith was not going to walk free again. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.